Hi everyone. I know this is a little weird to have a lecture online, but it's better than having me coughing all over you yesterday. So I appreciate your patience with this. So let's talk about the autobiography of an ex-colored man. Uh, a couple of background things to know about James Weldon Johnson first. Johnson was born in 1871, so about the same time as his narrator that he sets up in this novel. He was born in Florida, and his mother was a teacher and was pretty talented in music, and from a very early age it was clear that James Weldon Johnson was really talented in music as well. He spent part of his adult life actually as a composer and writing lyrics for songs for Broadway musicals. This novel was written in 1912 and it was originally published anonymously. It was republished in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance when James Weldon Johnson was a pretty active member of the Harlem Renaissance community, and in the 1920s it was widely acclaimed and really popular. It was a fairly obscure novel when it was originally published in 1912, but it's really important to know some things about the politics and the history of that original publication, because that original date has some real bearing on what happens in the novel as a whole. Now, I'm calling this a novel, and the title is Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, and so I think immediately we have to think about exactly how we characterize this book. It was published anonymously. It was published with the title Autobiography, and so its presentation of itself is as a piece of true nonfiction. One of the things to think about, particularly with its original publication date in 1912, is the way that this novel borrows on the first-person tradition of slave narratives. That there was a long history of publication of slave narratives, and so this title, autobiography, and the use of the word colored, or ex-colored, I suppose in this case, in the title, tie it to that tradition of slave narratives. Both in the title and in the narrative style, this sort of confessional mode, the ways in which he's very clearly telling his own personal story, that connection to slave narratives ultimately helped enhance the popularity of this novel, and also provides a kind of framework in which to read this story. Like slave narratives, this is a single account of one man's life that it can be taken to stand for experiences of a larger group of people. At the same time, he's not completely representative. He's not sort of an average Joe kind of guy, because the very fact that he is eloquent enough and well spoken enough to write such a beautiful book and to get it published makes him exceptional, right? Not just exceptional as an African American, but just exceptional in general, right? Not everybody has the kinds of skills it takes to produce a publishable quality book. So on the one hand, he is speaking for or speaking on behalf of a larger group of people. On the other hand, he is in some ways the exception to the rule. And that tension is really important as we start to consider the purposes that James Weldon Johnson has in writing this novel, as well as that his narrator has in explicitly what he says about why he tells his story. So let's think about this book a little bit, specifically as autobiography. It's not an autobiography in the traditional sense. It is not the life story of an actual, real individual who is talking about the events that led to him growing into the man he's become. It's fiction. It is a novel, but it's set up like an autobiography, and in some ways it borrows from the expectations of autobiography. So it's important to know something about how autobiographies work. Now, if you know simply what autobiography means, that it's a person telling his or her own life story, you may think that that's all you need to know. But it's really important to know a little bit about the genre itself, about the sort of normal expectations of what it means to tell your own life story. One of the things that is really important in autobiography is that you don't tell everything that happened. If you get a project in, third grade or something to tell your life story, you might write down, I was born here, and then this happened to me and my sister, and you might sort of march your way through the events that you can remember. But an autobiography is a carefully crafted kind of document. It doesn't just start with, here I was born and here's every single event of my life, March, 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 March. No, what authors do who write autobiographies is think very carefully about which events in their lives they want to talk about, they want to represent, and they choose those events not just because they make good stories or because they're interesting, but because the collection of events together sets up a kind of arc to a story, a kind of larger picture of how this person grew from the child he or she was into the adult that he or she became. So rather than tell every single event of somebody's childhood, an autobiography will pick 2 or 3 key events maybe that demonstrate how this person grew up into the adult he became, and that show the sorts of important influences, for example, or the characteristics and qualities of this person's personality, things that are sort of innate, stuff that makes this person who he is or who she is. So borrowing from those expectations of autobiography, the narrator here doesn't tell us every single thing about his life. He talks about a few key incidents and talks about how those shape who he was. As he gets older, he tells us more and more of the things that happened to him. But he still is choosing not only what to tell us, but also how to describe it so that it's very clear how the events that he describes help to form a picture of a whole, right? Not just a picture of a life, but a picture of a personality. The other genre, the other kind of writing that this novel borrows from is a kind of novel that people give a German name. It's called Bildungsroman. A Bildungsroman is a novel of personal development. It's a novel in which we typically meet the main character as a child. We watch that person grow up through his or her life into an adult. And like autobiography, we see how key events from this person's childhood shape the person the adult becomes. So Bildungsroman is sort of the fiction version of autobiography. It's what happens if you want to tell the life story of a character who's not a real person, right? And so it's got the same kind of arc as a traditional autobiography, where you move from childhood through school into adulthood.